Okay.
Oh, that's a cute picture, Stephanie. Picture on the Jada Art Fair.
Very nice. But we gotta see the carpet.
The red carpet. Yeah.
Cost us $200, so you better take a good picture.
Just take a picture of that and nothing else, as a matter of fact. Yeah, just your shoe on the red carpet.
And I don't even know how much it costs. I'm just saying. I don't know how. Well, it's all about the carpet. So your shoes, that's fine. There's a place right around the corner. Get it done. Come back. What's the deal with the red carpet anyways? It's just a carpet.
I prefer a purple.
A purple carpet?
Or a blue carpet. Like
blue?
if I were if I could turn back time and redefine what we were going to roll out for special events, like a purple. Why red? Why red? Why not like navy blue?
But where did it come from? When did it start?
I don't know. Interesting question. No,
We should change the topic of this talking.
Yeah. Is it too late?
No, we got
We have 2 minutes.
That's being spontaneous.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here Googling it.
We got 2 minutes. We need 5 references.
Yeah, we're changing this is overhauling the whole speaker series. Maybe.
I don't know. Why would...
Wow.
Okay, so the Oscars, they have to do with the gown, right? And like tuxedo.
Yeah, so maybe they put out a red carpet for the first Oscars.
So isn't the red carpet
But was
about
that the
getting
first
up the
time?
stairs,
Maybe it was.
right?
So on the red carpet, just like when you walk in, right? Like,
Yeah.
It also, but who came up with the idea of having red velvet marquee looks? You know what I mean? Because I feel like the red carpet
Wow,
kind
I
of
think we're
corresponds.
onto something.
We are.
Okay, so let's change the topic. We need 5 references.
Dana, how quick can we get a new graphic?
Tina, we got a minute and 23. Yeah, it's the MacGyver of. I got bubble gum. Can you take a picture?
Of this?
You see what Daniel's doing?
I can't see.
She's like behind. She's totally being like.
Oh, I see. Slow. You beat the processor.
Oh,
You beat the processor. This is what I get for having an iPhone 6.
We're doing this. Okay, so the idea here of this intro, so Jada is we play a lot with the idea of being a millennial, and the millennial generation started in 1981, the older millennials, like me. This intro is a reference to MTV's intro from 1981. It's a reference, so we're literally copying to show that we are inspired by what was happening in 1981 when MTV actually was important. Yeah. You remember that? The real MTV. It's 80s nostalgia.
Hello, and welcome to everyone online and in person for the next installment in our JadaTalks speaker series for Miami Art Week 2020. We are streaming live from the Jada Art Fair in beautiful Miami Beach. I am your host, Samuel Locher, and today we are going to be discussing redefining art and social influencer. An online presence has never been more important than it is now. Whether you are an artist, an influencer, a local restaurant, or a hardware store, occupying space online is absolutely essential. In the constantly evolving digital landscapes we find ourselves in, dynamic strategies to grow your audience and maintain engagement are key. Today, I am joined with the incomparable JadaTalks, artist, professor, intellectual, and co-founder of the Jada Art movement. And I am joined by Amanda Brooke. When Amanda was a little girl, she was that little girl at the Saks shoe department, passionately shoving her toddler feet into the most eye-catching high heels she could find. Naturally, she ended up in a high-profile career as a publicist in New York City, where she was ensconced in the grit and glamour of the fashion industry. Having recently returned to her home state of Florida with her handsome French bulldog, Chuni, she was searching for a way to remain connected to the fashion capital she had left behind. Enter From Apple to Orange.
Wow.
Thank you guys both so much for joining us today. Hi, Amanda.
Thank you, Sam.
Yes, and so for everyone just coming in, we have this really cool hybrid virtual and in-person kind of setup where we have a small, socially distanced, mask-wearing audience. And we have Amanda joining us from Zoom, as well as people watching the live stream online across Twitch, JadaTV.com, Facebook, and YouTube. So that being said, let's jump into the questions. So, social media is more important today than ever. That being said, what are some of the first social media platforms both of you had ever used? Amanda, would you like to take it first?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, to be honest, outside of MySpace, which honestly I don't even want to talk about, when I initially got into social media from a business perspective, I really was focused on Instagram. So I had a personal Facebook account, but my backstory, as you mentioned, is that I was a fashion publicist in New York City, and I would always look for brands to work with in the South Florida region before I lived here, and felt like there weren't necessarily any partners that had that contemporary to luxury fashion vibe in South Florida at the time. So when I moved down, I started from apple to orange to kind of fill that void, and so Instagram really is that first business profile that I used for a purpose.
What about you, Jonathan?
That's a great question. So when it comes to personal accounts, I would say that I go back to, I don't know if you're familiar with ICQ and obviously Universe Online, American Online was a big one, where there was already this pseudo social network.
Like AIM?
Yes, exactly. And but I would say the first one at a personal level, where I started to create a community that was online, geared towards art and art conversations, was probably MySpace.
Yeah.
And then Facebook became very big for me, with a business page as well as an artist. My art collective, which I've had art collective since I was very young, in the shape of collective art studios.
Yeah.
It was also on Facebook, and I would say so.
Excellent. So that kind of feeds into my next question. When did you begin to realize that social media was something that could be used as a launch pad for a business or a career?
I think I started realizing that pretty early on, especially being in the PR space and looking at social media from a brand's perspective. And, you know, I think that there are so many ways that social media platforms can be adapted to promote different businesses or specific influencers, of course, but it's been in existence for a while. You know, I don't think people realize that some of those OG influencers have been around for over 10 years. I personally started growing my following and monitoring it, and I think when I hit about 10K followers and actually had the opportunity to collaborate with a brand for the first time, that's when it really hit me that, you know, there's something different and there's potential. So that was about 5 years ago.
media profiles translating into actual sales
Yes.
that companies measure. So what about you, Jonathan?
For myself, I would say maybe 15 years ago, starting with a personal website and then plugging that with Facebook and having a way for viewers to buy, to shop online. And at that time, I made a good amount of sales. It was totally revolutionary to even do that. Now, when it comes to fine artists, I haven't to sell originals on canvas. It's much harder, but to sell prints or something that is an art product, since the very beginning, I would say of the past decade, I've had a certain level of success.
Excellent. So were either of you? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to chime in. I think now with Instagram stories being another realm that people can leverage, it is much easier to sell things, whether it's a dress or a piece of art. It really gives you the opportunity to talk to your followers about what that piece of art means or what your dress is like or how it makes you feel. And if you have over 10K followers, link to the product and get the sale. So there's a lot of room for business potential for sure.
And Amanda, if you don't mind me asking you, my experience is by engaging with the viewers, showing them the process to get to that final product. It's exactly what gets them to be interested in something that I'm making online. It's just the story, literally, is what they want, and that happens to come with the product. Is that your experience too?
Absolutely. So I think, especially in the case of Instagram, they felt like the photos on the main feed were becoming so highly edited, and people were really looking to show a specific image, but they weren't showing the behind-the-scenes process. And that's what people want to see. They want to get to know you. They want to know why you're creating things, what your inspiration is, and Instagram stories, to your point, allow people to do that. It shows the real side of things, and they go up live, and they're there for 24 hours, and that's the insight into the world.
So were either of you an early adapter to any of the major social media platforms that we use today?
Honestly, I wasn't. I am actually an extremely private person, believe it or not. So when social media started coming out, I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't want to share my life with people. I didn't want to have to post pictures. And until it really clicked in my head that there was also that business opportunity and that I was leaving New York City and wanted to kind of stay connected to the fashion industry, I didn't want any part of it. My dog had a PH, but that was it. And my friends really thought I lost my mind when I started my own personal page because I had been so private for years. And to be honest, as a social media influencer, that is something I still struggle with today. Getting on there, talking to people, letting them into the real side of my life and not just putting this like perfect image forward. So that's something I have to work on. But yeah, no, I was not an early adopter.
I was always an oversharer of my private life. So maybe a little too much. And nowadays, as a professor, it's quite difficult. So I tell my students, you can follow me on social media, but you might end up seeing your professor's nipple. And that's very embarrassing. And I tell them, look, the thing is this. I go to the beach. I'm Brazilian. I live in Miami. That's just how it is. So if you follow me on social media, I'll be myself. And obviously I have a filter. I make sure to not really overshare. But as primarily a painter, I feel that sharing the process is so important. And because I don't want it to be filtered, if I'm messy and if I'm just wearing a blanket, I want to share that process of reading, of thinking, of moving into this journey of creating a certain piece. And for me, the best conversations come from these sharing of very private moments. Obviously private, what I mean is just in the process of making art or in the process of getting some kind of inspiration, which involves sometimes going to places, getting exposed to certain landscapes, and that I like to share. and I have always done so.
I remember when Facebook first started, however many years ago, it was exclusive to people with that .edu email address, and you still meet some people every now and then that they're very proud of the fact that they were some of the first users on Facebook. I'd be a little embarrassed.
I know.
I actually was, and I am proud of not but didn't use it tons, but I have.
Right.
I was like a low-key Facebook stalker.
Oh.
So you were an early adopter. See, we're uncovering the
On
truth.
the stalking side, not the posting side. Very different.
Yeah. So, what lessons have both of you learned while trying to grow your audience on social media?
You wanna go first?
I could speak for 5 hours on this topic. I feel like I've made every mistake in the book when it comes to building and creating my own platform.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I think understanding your goals and knowing how to target the right audience as a result of those goals is the most important thing. So I was actually telling Samuel this over the phone last week that I just did a massive clean out of my follower list and removed over 50,000 followers, which would make someone fall off their chair. I know, and it seems crazy, but it was it was because I have amassed a huge international following, which is great, and I'm so appreciative of all of those fans, but I'm based in the US, and when I want to, work with brands that are based in the US, which is my primary focus, and that's kind of who I've honed in on, I was having a hard time landing those deals more recently, because when you have to send your audience insights and they look at your demographics, they want to see a primarily US focused following. So I had to remove a lot of international followers and a lot of men. I love you guys, but you are not buying my dresses, you're not buying my cowboy boots, you're not buying my earrings, and you literally, they were just scrolling through my pictures, never liking, never engaging, and then what happens is the Instagram algorithm stops showing my content to other people. So I had to do just like a whole sweep, and now I'm at just over 50K, and everyone that's there I'm proud to have, and I'll build it back up. But yeah, biggest lesson is know who you're targeting and target them appropriately, and if you have the wrong type of audience coming in for whatever your goals are, do a little sweep through.
And what you're speaking on is a pretty arduous process as well. Some people might not know, because there's a limit to the amount of people you can unfollow per day, and there's no program you can just plug in to do it for you. You have to go through.
And I wanted to make sure I was really manually removing the right people. It took me 9 months. I started right at the beginning of COVID. And imagine scrolling through 100,000 people every night and getting bumped back up to the top of Instagram. It was a thing, and I had to hire someone to help me at the end of it because I was losing my mind, quite frankly. But we are through the storm, and so my new content is going to come out now. I'm doing a little bit of a moodier, darker vibe. So I think the other advice I would give everyone is kind of, hone in on what that image is that you're trying to put forward. Whether you're an artist or you're a person or you're a brand, make sure that all of the content that you're posting is kind of filtered through that lens. And at any time you don't feel like you're properly being represented or you're not showcasing what you're hoping to showcase, then make a shift. There's no, no harm or no fault in changing your look and feel. I think that shows growth and new knowledge, and it's okay. So, and the rebrand phase as well.
We'd be remiss not to mention that you're creating a lot of this content with local Miami creative powerhouse, The Shooting Gallery, at The Shooting Gallery on Instagram.
Very interesting.
What about you, Jonathan?
Well, the algorithm has not helped me at all, and I recently got my account deleted after several warnings of content that was not appropriate for Instagram. The issue is the algorithm does not recognize my artwork as artwork. It thinks it's actually real people. I don't paint hyper-realism, but the algorithm thinks that some of my nude work, which is completely artistic, incredibly respectful, and the vast majority of my audience are women who really like my body positivity kind of message, the algorithm does not realize what it is yet. And I've written complaints, so I'm starting actually a new account that was beyond 24,000, and now I'm in the hundreds. So what to do about that? I have no idea. I believe that the answer to my issue is to branch out into different platforms, and I also believe that it's the process of that we go through. Thankfully, I have different channels that are channeling back to Instagram, and I think the algorithm is starting to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But it is a constant struggle, and for several years I've had this kind of warning saying, oh, it's not appropriate. Well, but is it appropriate to show a gun, to show violence all the time, to show perhaps an apology to drug use? That happens all the time, and they don't get any warning. Yet fine art is getting warning, and this is the kind of work that I specifically am very careful to not be inappropriate. And yet it's difficult for me.
It's so silly too because, I mean, like you said, it's artificial intelligence that's looking at your paintings, right? And so, and this is kind of like an age-old conversation too. At what point does it cease to be artwork and become pornography? But anyone who's seen JadaTalks' artwork can tell it's very clearly artwork and not pornography.
No, not at all.
You have to have a really twisted mind. I don't know,
No, it's actually quite conservative. It's quite conservative,
And it's beautiful, and it's just a shame that these artificial intelligence that just scans the photos. They detect a nipple. Also, men can show their nipples as much as they want.
100%.
But
So
God forbid it.
I use that as protest and also as a way to make new art. That's part of my process.
Right.
So I record that and I create new art with this kind of subjects. It's kind of a contention. It's interesting at the artistic level.
Have you tried, instead of just putting up pictures of your artwork itself, have you tried putting your artwork into an environment and taking the photo of the environment with the artwork? Are they flagging that?
So I have seen artists do that, and that does work. And that does make things a little bit better. The issue is to make that connection. I show the process of creating the artwork from the underpainting, actually from when somebody's posing to the sketching and then the underpainting, and coming to fruition, becoming, let's say, a masterpiece, however you define that. It's very difficult to then simply show it in an environment. You actually want to get everybody to participate. That is, yet there is a problem. So that's a good suggestion. Perhaps that is the only way to go. And you also have several accounts.
I have some other ideas, but we can talk offline, so I don't bore everyone. But I have some suggestions.
Oh, I will appreciate that so much. Thank you.
So, speaking of suggestions, final question. What tips do both of you have for people that are just starting out and looking to build a following on social media?
So I think once you kind of honed in on what your point of view is and what your brand is and what you're trying to accomplish and build, I think the biggest advice I have is to treat social media like a real life conversation, a real life relationship. So whatever you put out, you get back. If you want to have tons of likes and comments on your photos or your videos, you need to be dishing out those likes and comments. People like to feel loved the same way that you're seeking that, that approval yourself. So I think that's my biggest thing. Second, I would say don't listen to everything you hear. The algorithm is constantly shifting, and no one really fully understands what that means for Instagram or for Facebook. And you are the only one that can really know your audience, know when you should post, know when your followers are going to react best to your content. If you are doing this for a business reason, which I imagine most of you that are listening to this are, you should set up a business profile. Instagram gives you tons of insights so you can have, more of a breakdown on when to post and what your following looks like, and really get in there, like test things out, try posting every day, try posting every other day, try posting stories 4 times a day, try batching your stories, try only doing stories, every 2 hours, and kind of monitor what's working for you, because there is no exact science to this. The algorithm ranks people differently based off of their specific content and followers, and a art page does not do the same as fashion page. So there's just so much trial and error involved. And I think the other thing I would just say is try to be original. There's a lot of people doing very similar things as each other out there, and I know it's tough to reinvent the wheel, but figure out what your voice is and use it. It's a great way to make connections and share your points of view and your thinking, and try some stuff out that people haven't seen before, because that stuff does the best always.
Excellent. I would echo the initial suggestion that Amanda just made about treating social media as, let's say, physical, real life conversations, relationships. My experience has been that as especially Jada expands, but also personally as an artist, some of the most meaningful connections I have made at the international level have all started on either Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. These are people who became allies, business partners, people who joined the Jada art movement, and you engage in meaningful conversations as if you were sitting together at a restaurant, at a bar, and whenever you have the chance to meet those people in real life, you realize that you have had a real connection through all those moments for quite some time. So that is my understanding as well. That's very good.
And I think, just to wrap things up, we live in a very unique time right now in history, where the barrier of entry, whether you want to build a business online, whether you want to build, just a public profile online, the barrier to entry has never been so low. And 10 years from now, 5 years from now even, we don't know if it's going to be the same. And like you were kind of mentioning before, Amanda, Instagram and other social media platforms, they want to be your friend, if that's what you're looking to do. They make it easy. They do all kinds of, like Facebook and Instagram, you can do A/B testing with your ads. If you're a local business, you don't have to spend a fortune taking an ad out in the paper now. You could spend $50 a week on Instagram ads, and it could translate into a huge influx of business for you. So I think anyone who's thinking whether or not they would like to explore how they could grow their business potentially online, I mean, they should have done it already, but now, for real, while it's still, the barrier of entry is so low, it's really important. Take advantage of it. Seize the moment, seize the day, carpe diem, right?
Of course.
Yeah. And I just want to comment on the ad thing. It's fortunate and unfortunate that ads are in existence, because a lot of content will not rank as highly as it used to because of the fact that ads are in existence.
Oh, yeah.
The platforms want you to spend money to showcase your content to your followers and to create new audiences if you're a business profile. That said, to your point, you don't even need to spend $50 a week. I mean, sometimes you can boost a post or run a dark ad for $5 and reach thousands of people, and you can get so highly targeted with the exact demographic you're looking for, and it can be really beneficial for a business. So don't discount ads. They are frustrating at first, but they're there for a reason, and they can really support your goals and objectives.
Absolutely. Well, Amanda, JadaTalks, thank you both so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure speaking with both of you. It was a very insightful conversation. Everyone online, thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to go to JadaArtFair.com to check out the rest of our programming for the weekend. And take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. when you don't have a script, it sounds more like the kind of conversation that people want to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes that's the way to go, the best way.
Like with you and Susie, like we can do that for sure. Some of these other people,
Yeah. They
you gotta
need-
at least have some kind of
You
prompt.
gotta lead them. We're live. We're live. I love his intro.
I love the video. It makes me chuckle every time.
Right? Because it's dorky.
With the Jada
Yeah,
flag.
it does not look like it looks like it pasted. One thing that I do wonder if we have to change the eventually is when we have the American flag right on the shoulder, the astronaut.
Gonna make it a Jada flag.
Well, yeah, because it does look like there's a. We're from here, right? But we're becoming so international that that's one little thing that I can think of.
Well, when we're internationally, we're almost like astronauts coming from the United States somewhere else.
That's what
Put
it
our
is.
flag down.
That's what it is, yeah. But for people to have that native sense of ownership,
Yeah.
they might not enjoy that. Then I'm loving your work. The friend one is also great.
And we're getting a picture of the TV. And that's going to That's one small step for man, giant leap for mankind.
That's weird.
I think it was actually on the moon. Hello, and welcome to everyone in person and online to the next installment in our JadaTalks speaker series. We are coming at you live from the Jada Art Fair for Miami Art Week 2020. And today I am joined by JadaTalks and Suzanne Khalil, two artists affiliated with the Jada Art movement. And today we are going to be discussing a very Jada topic,
Oh yes.
the end of irony and the birth of a new sincerity. New sincerity repudiates the idea of irony and any other concept that purposely distorts meaning. The new sincerity movement strives to communicate an earnest meaning clearly and concisely. For too long, we have relied on irony to express our ideas, our relationships with one another. The future today calls for naivete and sincerity in the way we approach one another to ensure that nothing gets lost in translation across the hybrid digital physical landscape that we currently operate out of. And talk about currently operating out of a digital and physical landscape, because we have a very unique setup right here, as people in person can see. We are live streaming this online, and we have Susie commuting in through Zoom, and we also have JadaTalks joining us here in person. So tell us a little bit about how that ties into the new sincerity.
Susie, I'll give you the honor to start.
Oh, well, first of all, there's an immediate contradiction. And the contradiction seems ironic, kind of feels ironic, and that is during this time And yet, here I am, zoomed in from across the country, and my artwork is there, present, in a physical space where people can mask up and come see it. There's a lot of sincerity in the fact that we are adapting and doing the best we can in this time, acknowledging the importance of connection, albeit I'm zoomed in and physically not present, and attempting to really respect what's going on in the world in terms of not wanting people to have unnecessary exposure, to continue to take the virus seriously, and yet recognize that it's so important right now for the arts to occupy physical spaces. So I just wanted to kind of roll that out. We have a lot to talk about, but the setting itself feels a little ironic, but knowing that it is all a sincere cascade of challenges in front of us, it's not so ironic. It's more sincere, and it's rolling through time. So I'm glad to join you. Thank you for the introduction. I'd love to just dive into this. John, just a lot of people who may just be joining us are new to the metamodernist movement. And when we decided, you and I and Sam would talk about irony and sincerity, it was with an asterisk that we're really talking about is metamodernism.
Yes.
And the better person than you, I ask the mic to you to give an introduction to what metamodernism is. And I think you and I will have a good time digging into irony and sincerity. And I know you're a few audience members, and it would be great if anyone wants to participate to just like voice your thoughts. And while you might not be wearing a mic, the two of you, Sam and John, just can give more audio by repeating whatever's said. But it'd be great if this is a conversation.
Yeah.
Because, it should be.
Well, yes, the beauty of this conversation is that, again, it looks ironic, it seems very ironic that we are talking about the birth of new sincerity, perhaps even the demise of postmodernism, right? So, yet we're here ironically getting together, quote unquote, with Zoom as our main aid in order to be here, right? The idea of connectedness and togetherness is only possible virtually. So, but we are the generation that can talk about this with sincerity, with understanding, in-depth understanding, because we are the original digital romantics, right? So many of us can easily fit into that, whether you are a baby boomer, a millennial, a Gen Z, you understand what is to deprive yourself either due to fear of society, right? A lot of our children, ourselves, depending on your age, you grew up with the fear of violence, as the urban settings and even rural areas were changing so much. We got more connected online, and we tried to create this idea of togetherness, of a community in chat groups, and then little by little, our friends and families creating these social networks via social media. So we understand what is this attempt to create real connection through an artificial or virtual channel. So the condition of metamodernism was understood within this midst, this oscillation between being able to go outside and get dirty, playing outdoors with sports that you get very hands-on, while having to adapt to a new reality, one in which we have to think outside the box from different angles, and which is postmodernism. So this oscillation between modernism and postmodernism is exactly metamodernism, right in the middle, with something new that we are understanding day by day as this new decade starts. That's a quick intro, which is still confusing, and I believe this conversation is going to help us understand it a little bit better.
On the topic of postmodernism, I remember going through art school, and this was in I guess, early 90s, and postmodernism was full strength. Artists were still being funded by the National Endowment for the Arts and could create pure art. When I say pure art, I mean really something different than decoration, different than craft. Art that was intended to provoke thought, to rouse a curiosity about meaning, to rouse an interest in the arts by considering different mediums and how they were being used at the time. Art that was put forward to create greater appreciation for art by virtue of art. So art that referenced other artists, building on a foundation of history. And increasingly, to understand the arts, you had to be an insider. And that was something that I remember the general public having a bit of pushback on. People would go to museums and have a feeling like they didn't understand what was going on in the arts, and that it was cold, and that maybe there was a dialectic, but they didn't know what the dialogue was.
Yes.
And we had greater and greater reliance on curators to push through different ways of learning as we go. So we had headsets in galleries. We had docent-led tours. Docents aren't a new thing, but during the era, the height of postmodernism, docents were incredibly important to the museum goer because it was a translation that had to happen. Or the museum goer often found the most interesting thing about the museum was the gift shop, and it was in and out, and that the value of the museum was really the value of the gift shop. That engagement and the touching, the handling, or even just the understanding was very much pushed back if you were not an insider. At least that's what I gathered from taking in my observation at people who were in museums. So as an art maker, quite often I would go to spaces of human art and watch how people viewed art and watch how people navigated spaces. And that was important because I was, doing installations, etc. But understanding my audience was also an interest. So one thing I want to raise as we start to weave together how postmodernism, metamodernism, and modernism are related to irony and sincerity is to consider that with irony, there is a reference scheme that has to happen for something to be ironic. It's contextualized in a history. And one more piece about me being an art student, and then I want to link to you, because I think how we're raised as artists, if we went to an art school, is incredibly relevant. The conversation, we're talking about an institution or a canon of acceptance or a canon of tradition that evolves. The other thing I found during the height of postmodernism was an incredible dissection of material quality within each sphere and domain of the arts. So that art making was very much about art making, and the focus on the medium was very much a dissection of what the medium could do and what the medium could not do. And for new media, that was very much a breaking down to little microscopic elements, and it became very heady, very cerebral. And irony really relies on a knowledge base. Irony is not immediate. I mean, the tongue-in-cheek humor of irony can feel immediate, but it's only if you have trace memory of everything that's been cited and referenced.
Yeah.
So I'll pause there.
Wait,
and John, just you jump in now, or Sam, or whoever wants to. Because the piece on irony and maybe the state of the arts during postmodernism, how irony may have been used.
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit, talking about microscopic elements. I was discussing with Ari yesterday the exhibit that you had shown me online before that I just learned that Ari had also participated in, where you had the world's smallest image, right? You had to get it made in a microchip factory in Singapore. And Ari was telling me about how you guys installed it together, how you needed the special lenses to even view it. And then Ari also had an installation. It's called Blink, did you say? It was called Blink, with the fried eggs with the red light blinking in them. And he was saying how the two of you had discussed that the real artwork would be recording the audience interacting with it and seeing how they mentioned it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great reference. Okay, so you act. I love that you're learning about two of my pieces that you didn't get to experience. I want you to experience them one day. One piece is a silicone wafer, and the only way to do that piece is through a nanoscope. And that piece was not on exhibit. There's another piece, very small, but that piece is a very intentional piece, and I think it's worth talking about here because yes, it's minuscule, and I was absolutely breaking down my medium. I mean, I'm working as an artist. My medium is photography, which is writing with light, or translation to be able to write with light. And I have an image of a turtle. I lived in South Florida. A turtle was hit on a highway, and I photographed that turtle. It really struck me because this was a protected species, and I found it as I was walking. And of course, it's like the metaphor of our superhighway. Quite literally, the turtle was killed on our superhighway. And cars just zoom past all the time. I'm sure whoever hit it just felt a slight bump and carried on about their day. And yet, there's a species that we all want to protect, flattened on the road. Well, what are we going to do? Are we going to pause and hold a funeral? Are we going to hold a memorial? Are we even going to remove it from the road? We don't. We just go about our day. It was like dirt on the tire at the end of the day. We looked at the tire and said, I wonder what that was. Or we felt the bump. We barely noticed our interaction with nature. So I photographed this. I photographed this poor, now dead turtle, and it meant a lot to me that I captured it. And the vein of my photography for years had been this very delicate reprinting of images that would capture. Now, photography is a history thing, a documentary form, and quite often people almost confuse the reference for reference, looking at a photograph for the thing itself. And we'll talk about it as an apple. I mean, maybe it seems like a converted language, and we should say that it's a photograph of an apple, but nevertheless, you see a photograph of an apple and it triggers apple. So my work became very much a veil of trying to get people to recognize that they're looking at a trace recording of something. So my imagery has always been very faint, minimal amount of pigment, almost none, looking like the image is coming into or going out of existence at the same time, barely recorded. So I photographed this turtle. I first printed it that way. Now, it felt right and special, but this was at a time when people were uploading millions and millions of images of their food, every selfie shot from every angle, given a nice sunset. And I was grappling with what is the meaning of a photograph? Has the meaning of a photograph completely lost its spirit? What does it mean to photograph our food, and why are we filling the airwaves with photographs of food? And is this about, enticement or jealousy making, to photograph your decadent dessert? So I'm processing all of this and thinking about the state of the arts, and thinking about the state of photography, and thinking about, oh my gosh, this poor turtle. And it's like the way artists work, as you both know, is that everything you grapple with as a human being comes together like at the tip of a pin when it's time to create a piece of artwork. Because it's all of your lived experience, all of your thoughts contributing to what you're going to create in that moment. And so in that moment, my decision was that I wanted to create a viewing experience where you had to pause your life. You had to completely pause all the distraction and static in your world and quite literally hold your breath for a moment of appreciation. And that is the experience you have, by the way, when you're looking through a nanoscope. I once looked through a nanoscope. There's a nanotechnology lab in Tempe, Arizona, and I was gifted with the opportunity of viewing a CD, an old-fashioned, now they're old-fashioned CD, a compact disc, through a nanoscope. If you view a CD through a nanoscope, you do have to hold your breath because any movement of your body really throws the focus off. So you hold your breath, you look into the scope for just a moment, and what you see is a whole new universe of mountains and valleys. Mountains and valleys on a CD are really the zeros and ones, right? The holes and the lateral holes. So what I ended up having a cooperation for at the lab out of Singapore was creating on silicone wafer that turtle. So that you had to pause your life, quite literally stop all the chaos, and jump off that superhighway to be able to peer in and see what this thing was and reveal it is a really good turtle. So that's not the piece that Art was talking about, but you brought it up, Sam.
Right.
But it illustrates breaking down a medium, very much deconstruction, right? It's very postmodern to use a photograph in this way, to use time in this way, to use presence in this way. In Florida, South Florida, the installation that Ari was telling you about was of a minuscule chair. And postmodern artists are absolutely guilty of rehashing their work over and over. And it has been a blessing and a curse for me that I have had images that I have not been willing to let go of, that I have continued to work on and work on. So imagine you have one image and you're working on that image, the presentation of that image for, here's an honest answer, no less than 26 years. So for 26 years, I've battled with this little image. It wasn't always little, but with this image, we'll just say. And the image is of a chair, called Aristotle's chair. It's a chair that I found, and I photographed it. Simple enough. See an interesting shape, capture it. And the question of what to do with that chair has become like this lifelong internal dialectic. So the image that you referenced, Sam, that was in South Florida, was a photographic representation of this chair, printed probably 2 millimeters by 5 millimeters at most, which would be considered huge compared to the nanochip. And it was placed in a gallery wall. And in order to view that, by the way, in the gallery wall there was a light box, and, a field of black. You knew there was an image there. But in order to view that, you had to go right up against the wall with a little tiny scope that looked a lot like a cell phone, by the way. And a line developed, by the way, in the museum. And no one could have a shared experience of this. Everyone had a private experience. And the interesting thing for me was the aha moment. And that is when somebody realized what they were looking at. Well, why the chair? Why has this image haunted me for so many years? The chair is kind of half in and half out of existence. You know much about philosophy. The reference to Aristotle is essence and accidents. You get rid of all the things you don't need, all the accidental features, you're left with the essence. So anyhow, very deconstructionist. I position an image out, to the general public to view that is barely materialized, it's barely there. And when you see it, you complete what it is. You complete that it is in fact a chair, even though it barely reads as a chair. And how do you see it? It goes straight up to the gallery wall. Straight up to the gallery wall is violating every norm we know in museums, right? Like when people navigate spaces, they stand clear, they offer distance, and creating a small image and a light box, like we're all bugs going to light, I pull the gallery viewer straight to the wall so that they have a more intimate experience. So with what I began talking about, you'll recognize that this is in context of postmodernism. This was a comment on how to get to know art, how to connect with art, how to get close to art.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a pause there. Too much of my voice.
No, it's never too much, Susie, because whenever you speak, there's just so much that goes into it, and it teaches us that the complexity of making claims when it comes to art, and that is a good segue to talk about postmodernism. When you give an example, you explain. You just spoke about the turtle. You spoke about the chair, Aristotle's chair. You brought knowledge, and now we can all connect to your subject. Postmodernism is not that. Postmodernism is self-referential. It's kind of in a layperson's kind of a language. It's kind of like an inside joke, right? You have to be part of the club, and it's very much insular. It's very much nepotistic as well.
And there's
right?
a high barrier of entry.
It's a very high barrier of entry, and the truth is this: it was necessary at a certain time. It was necessary. It was very much necessary so that we could create a new breed of intellectuals, of makers. New artwork had to be made. New philosophies in art had to be made, written, and this was a time when art needed to perhaps speak that kind of language. The issue is when it became nihilistic, right? The issue is when it became something that does not provide hope in a world that desperately needed hope. And that is what is the purpose of metamodernism, right? Metamodernism is exactly when we understand collectively that we have moved past the time when we can afford to have a story that does not end with hope, right? We live in a world in which just by making it to December, you know you are one of the winners. At least 500,000 people did not make it. They started January, they're not going to see December this year throughout the world, right? So to have stories, narratives, to spend time and resources to provide stories that do not bring an open end that perhaps can lead to hope, to censor hope, to say that to be romantic is to not be artistic enough, to say that to be nostalgic, to rely on folklore or even spirituality is not to be an intellectual. That is the kind of message that we don't need nowadays.
Absolutely. You just really hit it. And that is something I hold fundamental. When I say it, for me, it's something I hold fundamental, which is the root of art making is to connect on the human universals. I feel as artists we're working in a universal space where the human existence can be shared or better understood or serve to connect one another by prompting questions and dialogue.
Exactly.
We're taking the consciousness of this human experience to another level. And to have art makers in a tradition of just embeddedness and exclusion ends a conversation.
Exactly.
The conversation stops.
Exactly.
The new, it feels very much to me like we are moving as collective artists from being in a very heady space to being in a space more driven by the heart. And that sounds romantic.
Yes.
And it also kind of sounds like, anything goes. And I'm not going that direction either. I'm somewhere where there matters most feels to me authenticity. And I think authenticity has always mattered.
Sure.
But now, at a time of crisis, and also at a time of almost like at a time of unveiling, that for me postmodernism has died, and we've done an unveiling, and now life goes on. That we are past postmodernism. I am past postmodernism, and the artwork that I see characterizing the movement of the next generation is in a different space, in the unveiling. And in the unveiling is authenticity, sincerity, and unapologetic arrival at the table to be part of a conversation.
Exactly. And I would say so. I would say that what happens at this moment is exactly that. It's an understanding that if we are able to occupy any space for art, right, it must carry within its intention the sparking of a new conversation. It's always an invitation. We're no longer trying to provide answers, but simply interesting questions. First of all, so it's totally open-ended. It's also, we're trying to understand that we have burned some bridges. And it's perhaps the moment to rebuild bridges that were lost and create new bridges. And now that we are here, and you are here through Zoom, and we're meeting in a physical space as well as a virtual space, we realize that we have more tools to create meaningful conversation. Jada stands for this kind of idea, which is you go somewhere, and if you're going to occupy a space, make it meaningful, right?
Exactly. Well, right there, I just want to jump in. How many times pre-pandemic, how many times 2019 did you enter a space, it's maybe a restaurant, or just observe people hanging out with one another, but were they each were on their phones, they were each looking down and disengaged from presence. Arguably, they were connected to something, connected to some information. But also, very likely, it was a superficial, very linear engagement of responding to questions or responding in acknowledgement that you've seen something on whatever media that you follow. And now there's a whole new reverence and respect for how we even use technology. And you've introduced the term digiromantic. And we know through many examples, and this goes back further, deeper, even into pre-COVID, that we absolutely can lean on technology for incredibly meaningful relationships. But now, the technology is the lifeline. And there are quite literally people in hospitals, isolated, battling life and death, able to interact on their phone. The conversations are different. So when I began with the almost obsession with what are all these billions of images that people are uploading every day? Why are you documenting these nuances of life that maybe aren't that meaningful, just chronicling our daily experience? Instead of just chronicling our experience, how are we interacting with one another with our technology? And are we taking pause at meaningful conversation? I'll just raise it by way of an example. As part of the Jada movement, the Jada Paris group, how we all forge a very special relationship by virtue of a meaningfully engaged chat. For those people who are listening in, Donatus and I and others, Sam and Dana and artists were engaged daily and prompts and responding to each other, responding to images and asking philosophical questions. And yes, we were going about our day. But the notification that there was yet something else on the feed was not just a notification to see something to like it or dislike it, but it was a notification which was a tap to engage. And we're moving past liking and disliking and recognizing the importance of engagement. And technology kind of became easy all of a sudden. It was not liking and disliking, or noticing, or following. And now I think we're recognizing the importance of human engagement. And so,
And one thing I want to touch on is a kind of reoccurring theme that we've had throughout the weekend is we talk about how technology has become a real lifeline for connection, this idea of digiromanticism, especially since the onset of the pandemic. But for many people, it already was even beforehand. You know, there are a lot of people that maybe they live in small rural communities, that they don't have many people in their, immediate physical area that share their same interests. Jonatas, with Paris, you were telling me you had a friend from Paris that you had so many conversations with that you had never actually gotten to meet in person until you went to Paris for the art fair. Yeah.
So, what we're learning, for instance, I have a WhatsApp group that's called 80s, as in that decade, in Brasilia. I was born in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, and all of my childhood friends are part of this WhatsApp group, right? So we share memories, we make fun of each other, we network, we create bridges of various kinds. People are sharing pictures of their babies, of their weddings, of their breakups, taking advice from each other. That's digital romanticism. I cannot be close to my friends, and it's not the same thing to be in that WhatsApp group, but it's the closest to being close to them, you know? So I'm doing my very best to create this meaningful connection. I will use FaceTime if it's possible. I use voice recording so people understand the emotions that I'm trying to portray in what it is that I have to say. And we're just doing our very best with the intention to one day be able to have this one-on-one connection. But if we don't, we will make this meaningful while we can, with what we can. And what I see here is, Susie mentioned our experience in Paris. We were there perhaps just a month ago or so. And the incredible thing about Paris is that we connected with people who we had been speaking to for several years online via Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. So they joined us, right? Scholars, artists. But because of the onset of the pandemic that worsened in Paris, there was a full lockdown. And prior to the lockdown, there were travel restrictions. So many of our American collective couldn't go. So some of us were able to go, and once we got there, we simply decided to make new connections. You know, meet friends of a friend, and those people, together with those who we met only online, we ended up creating one strong group to the point that now we have Jada with its own declaration in Paris, the Jada Paris Declaration, which identifies their own needs and ways to address it as a collective in Paris, independent from all of us here in the US. That is the intention of digital romanticism, the angst to create a real connection. And why we can't, we're going to do our very best right now. But once we can, we will actually go as far as creating something that might last a lifetime. That's always the intention.
One thing that I find interesting these days with how we're leveraging technology, digital romanticism, and in the media, when I'm, of course, watching MSNBC or CNN, and everyone is zooming in as affiliates, as correspondents. And when you're watching, it's a new appreciation for authenticity, that you are seeing people in front of their bookshelves. And every bookshelf is no longer the same. In fact, one person has his Star Wars figures, someone else is maybe in their kitchen. You just hope that a child is going to run through the screen at any moment. Because that will be a signal that we are now more comfortable expressing we are all humans, and that we do not all have polished lives, and we're living authentically, and we are doing our best in a very sincere way to connect with each other during difficult times. That, by the way, I think is one of the gifts of this era that we're going through, which is the polished presentation is not the best presentation. The presentation of authentic self in showing up and being present, that is most revered right now.
So, Susie, if I don't mind me, I just want to mention something related to this. The big Instagram revolution of abandoning the highly filtered images and relying on the stories, right? Forget about the images, the posts. Some people are not even posting once a month. And now the stories on Instagram that is the main vehicle for connection, because people are tired of the highly filtered image. They want to see the unfiltered, the raw, the process, the day-to-day. They want to see you not wearing makeup, not being ready for that highly curated image that eventually you create high contrast and all that. So that is the idea. We are living in a unfiltered reality. We're all sick and tired of quarantining or not being able to live our lives the way that we used to, and we know it's probably never going to come back. And we're sharing the struggle, and that way we see ourselves in each other, and that creates connection, and it goes on and on and on.
So at this moment, I want to open the conversation to the audience. I believe we have a question from Charlia.
Yes, hi.
Hello.
You mentioned something about the one world connection, right? And we know that art is not objective, it's highly subjective, personal, and personal is political, right?
Yes.
So knowing that art plays a political function,
It does.
what do you foresee? What do you foresee the role of art in this idea of a one world connection being hijacked politically for different agendas?
Okay, so did everybody understand? Did you hear it, Susie?
I followed most of it. Why don't you restate it just so that we can hear it clearly?
Oh, to restate it. So art is subjective, right? It relies on culture, locally, and So if it's subjective and yet meaning can carry political connotations, and that can vary from place to place. And what if that meaning is hijacked for political reasons?
Yes. That great example just came out immediately, and that is there was
Okay, sorry, Susie, very quickly. Our audience members said specifically around the idea of the one world connection.
Okay. Yeah. So the challenge in moving past irony into sincerity, one thing we are doing is demanding that what is put forward be defined by pure intention. That the intention is not tongue-in-cheek. And I think it's a calling to artists to be very forthright and deliberate in expression. Now, art oftentimes needs to live on its own, and artists can't always run around and doing it with meaning. But there, by way of example, I just recently read something that was about a right-wing white supremacist group that was in between irony and sincerity with its English, saying that something that was said that was incredibly heavy, let's just say, was taken back as that was just said as a joke, right? So using irony to propagate subversive messaging, questioning in all sincerity, really, where did this person from this group stand? What did they mean? Yes, art is subjective, and yet the idea of one world really stands to the side of artists who have multiplicity of meaning and lived experience. I don't think artists ever want to come together for a singular voice, because one of the things that artists historically have done in place in society is to advance past the comfort and to be disruptive. The idea of one world and disruption, that was a teeter totter, because we talk about who's the coward and who is disenfranchised. And quite often you have to move to the artist to represent the disenfranchised. So, a lot of terms here. So there's irony and sincerity. I think that's bundled in this question. There's subjectivity and objectivity bundled here. And there is the task of what is the role of the artist as we seek to unite for a universal oneness, and at the same time acknowledge that there's some very dangerous perspectives of oneness right now. My personal take on this is that there is no such thing as art for art's sake. There was a talk that was delivered a few months ago. Karen Leader gave that, and I very much stand with her. I do not believe art for art's sake, simply because the artist has imbued an intention in their own art, and it's never art for art's sake so much as it is art for the intent of the artist's sake, and the artist having an intention will always imbue it. Things don't exist to exist. The maker imbues it with intention. So I think that the role of the artist these days is to advance a reflection, a self-reflection in society. So there is that near-term back on society. I think that the artist has held that sacred spot, very Joseph Campbell thinking, the hero's journey. So,
And
Jonathan,
we often speak about the hero's journey, and it's they struggle, and the only way to grow is through struggle. Now, I agree with you. We live in complicated times, and one of the side effects of this search for meaning is that we search for connectedness, togetherness, and the way that this can go wrong is when you search for people who echo your opinions. So there's the echo chamber.
Likewise with art, when we have a canon of art, and we have all the artists lining up as soldiers, creating duplicity, and that never works, right? That never works for the artist. It doesn't work for the community.
Exactly.
It's the diversity of the artist in different conversations.
Yes.
Create, the insights in the development. Go ahead.
What I do see, Susie, is that quite recently, I would say that for the past couple months, there is this backlash to cancel culture, right? Because what is cancel culture? There's this idea that, okay, we want to cancel somebody, right? Let's just block the voice of this person. Now, it came from a great intention. Well, this person has been a misogynist, this person has been a racist, this person has been somebody who has misrepresented someone or a group or something. Let's just ignore that person. And it served great purpose. But then it became kind of like, let's get our group to cancel that one group. So the idea of oneness could have been distorted as well, which is, if you don't agree with us, we will silence you. So it's very difficult in a democracy, in a way, whenever we want to respect individual thought, we want to have a diversity of thoughts and opinions. So when does it become right to censor and block a certain voice, right? These are questions that are very complicated. And the only thing I can say is to go back to the idea of sincerity. Sincerity is recognizable. Sincerity now, for that, you also have to be a sensitive person. And for the past 10 years, even 15 years, perhaps since 9/11, people have become more desensitized to judging others based on what they look like and their opinion, right? Because one of the ways that we led our lives since 9/11 was to what? Identify danger beforehand, identify, right? This was one of the Bush administration's policies, right? The idea of you have to let go of a little bit of your privacy so that we can protect you. So you gotta judge, you gotta, in a way, profile, so that we can protect each other. And a practice such as this for over a decade has produced what? Tribes. So the idea of tribalism, which can result in neo-Nazism, in fascism of different kinds and all that. And so we have to train ourselves to be able to say, listen, this is right, this is wrong, what is the end product of this intention?
Also, everything you're saying is happening in the backdrop.
Yes.
Constant recording of everything we are saying and doing, visiting, our digital footprints. Yeah. I think that we have to get to a point of recognizing that we don't want scripted people.
No.
We want people who are robust and honest, authentic.
Exactly.
And can say they're uncomfortable, that we pause without reaction to engage. Yeah.
Yes. We have an audience member who has a question, and we told her to grab a seat and sit right here in the middle.
This is my good friend Charlia.
Hi.
There you go. Welcome, Charlie.
Hi, thank you.
We gotta keep a little bit of a social distance too.
Yes, just a little bit.
And here we got it.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
All of your comments are extremely interesting, and I wanted to, dive a little bit more into this idea of tribalism, right? Because as humans, we have a threshold to how many distinct identifiers we're able to process in our minds, and that I think three. I think they're, I don't know.
If you go beyond, it becomes too much.
It becomes chaotic. But in that tribalism, it does, I think there is an extent to which tribalism is effective and is essential. I think the question is what are the qualifications of the tribes that we're building? If it is only based on what we can profile, that's where we run into issues, and like you said, it gives rise to, extremist groups. based on values of authenticity, integrity,
Sincerity.
compassion,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
empathy, then I think tribalism can be really powerful,
Yes.
especially to combat this wave that we're seeing of globalization that has eroded unique tribes' identities
Sure.
and experiences.
Mhm.
So how, or not even how, if we engage in tribalism in that way, using art as kind of the vessel, you know, what in your wildest imaginations can we produce as a human experience?
Well, what I'll tell you something. All of these terminology, I mean, we can talk here for 4 hours at least.
For sure.
So it's beautiful. It's complex. It's complex. On one hand, globalization.
Yeah.
There are beautiful things that can come out of that. There are horrible things that can come out of that.
Yes.
Same thing with tribalism,
Yes.
right? What kind of tribalism are we talking about, right? Is it the one that you say you are different, you don't let me get you out of here, or is it the one that we say identify with you? I see myself as one with you, and I see you as a brother or as a sister, regardless of what you look like.
Right.
That's beautiful.
Right.
That's the kind of tribalism that we say. It's kind of like a return to primitivism.
Yes.
That is a beautiful kind of return, right?
Right.
Now, going wrong is what? You don't look like me, get out of here or else, right? Now, globalization, and there are many, we're talking about culture and economics, and in my personal opinion, I do believe in keeping, for instance, culturally, I'm a purist. I'm not gonna lie. I like language to go back to a certain thing. Not every language is like English that changes every day.
Quickly,
You
yeah.
can create a verb
Yeah.
right now. You can Google something.
Yeah.
You know. Let's zoom later.
Yeah.
I mean, English is a beautiful, malleable language, right? But I don't like to see that, for instance, in Portuguese. I don't like to see that because
Really?
I don't like it.
Okay, but it
that's
exists in
personal.
Portuguese.
But it exists in-
because
right.
you speak Brazilian Portuguese.
Yes.
And there's
Which is-
Brazilian
Exactly.
and then there's
Yeah.
Portuguese,
Right.
and there's
Cape
Portuguese.
Verdean
and-
Portuguese.
Exactly.
But the issue is so what Portuguese does that's English. I mean, and I don't mean to. I don't mean to switch topics. But what Portuguese does that is different from the English language is that we have a Portuguese academy
Yeah.
that will say we're not gonna go that way.
I see.
Yeah.
But what is the reason?
The reason is because otherwise the dominant language for business and entertainment will go inside these other languages and will create something inauthentic that won't reflect the. It's kind of like a vehicle of colonization.
I was gonna
I was
say,
about
because
to
it
say-
sounds real
Yeah.
colonial.
I was
in
gonna say, I
practice.
suspect the academy is in Portugal and not Cape Verde,
Exactly.
right?
Well, yes. So the okay, but then you have to go back
Right.
hundreds of years.
But that's
yeah.
the thing is the constant time travel that we're having to do,
Yeah.
and I think artists are so great at it
Yes.
because I think artists do this beautiful thing of going back in time into primitivism, trying to kind of gather what works and what is
Sure.
beautiful and fits, and then transport it into
Yeah.
either the present or project into the future.
100%.
So I think it's this really beautiful
Yeah.
dance, and for people that are puritists or survivalists, there's a lot of
Yes.
African survivalism where people
Sure.
like to create Africa, the continent, as this static entity. I think there's so much danger in that because the reality is that things change. Time is constant. There is no stop to it, and everything exists within the construct of time. Language, culture, identity, place. I mean, race, everything. So it's like
So when it comes to
Dance.
what's the issue is this: when it comes to what's natural,
Yeah.
for instance, the idea of race, religion, gender, you can see all of these. You can see spectrums and evolution constantly every day.
yeah,
Sometimes you also have these very powerful entities. For instance, when it comes to commerce, right? Conglomerates,
Yes.
right? And they carry within their campaign a change in vocabulary.
Yes.
And that I find problematic. For instance, to go to a place and say, let's have, so you say everything in a certain language, but the verbiage becomes more foreign So little by little, that is a new kind of colonization that's happening. You see what I mean?
I see.
Yeah.
So it's an imposition, but a natural imposition. Nobody's saying you do this or else. No, nobody's saying that. But it's happening. And a decade passes and people will no longer speak a certain thing. However, if you're talking about a community that is in a diaspora, such as what we have here, so many dialects of immigrant communities, right? That are so unique, let's say, to South Florida. That is where I see the natural evolution of an identity that I find personally beautiful.
Yeah.
I see a lot of tribalism that is violent in that here.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
You know?
That even goes into gangs and definitely. Affiliation, how you identify insiders,
I was going to say, the idea of tribalism at a local level often feels community-driven, supportive, a way of echoing shared values and finding strength. And what we see is that with every tribe there tends to be antithesis or other tribes that are maybe, let's just say, not playing nicely together. And the idea of self and other, of tribe and opponent tribe, ironically then gives life to separation.
Yes.
And while a tribe identity may have emerged out of interesting cohesion, the separation that's happening in a tribal way, at least in this country, has served to alienate. And so I guess one lane of change that I hope to move forward in the future is that while I'm not advocating for disbanding tribes, what I would be advocating is how can we get to understand or translate the languages, the in-tribe languages, in such a way that we can understand one another and how someone would come to having a disposition. And there's position and disposition. And some of the things, John, that you started to bring up about dilution of language, about lack of ownership of language, about language being decontextualized, makes me want to also kind of insert the idea of phenomenology, and that is meaning takes on the meaning that it evolves into.
Yes.
So I guess we can start to think of, with the prompt question, going back 10 minutes, was, how do we think of one-mindedness or one-worldness?
Yes.
And I guess that's the logical extension. Are we ever going to get to one tribe?
No.
Will we ever be of one? And
Do we want to?
what
Do we
a
want
dreamy thought experiment, what will it take for all of ourselves to become plumpy so that we see ourselves as humans, as a collective human entity, so lucky to share the same time and place together?
Well, with that being said, Susie, JadaTalks, Charlia, I'm so happy to have three of my favorite teachers together. It's always a learning experience when I'm around all of you. Everyone online and in person, thank you so much for tuning in. This is our final installment in the JadaTalks speaker series for Miami Art Week 2020. We did it. Be sure to go to JadaArtFair.com to see the rest of the programming we have planned. Thanks for tuning in. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye, Susie.